Did you know that Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine was a planned attempt to revive the Soviet Union? Was geopolitical expansion the only motivation, or were there other, more personal reasons? Putin's actions were motivated by hubris, ambition, and long-standing vendettas. This decision has changed the world and put Russia in danger. Discover what pushed Putin to this war and the heavy price Russia is paying. Putin's Soviet restoration goals. Before discussing how Putin's arrogance will destroy Russia, we must learn more about him. What prompted his invasion of Ukraine? When speaking publicly, Putin hints at why he attacked Ukraine. He is a nationalist who misses Russia's former power. Putin wants to resurrect the Soviet Union's glory days, ignoring its internal strife, and restore Russia's control over Europe. Putin's February 2024 Tucker Carlson interview hints at this agenda. Putin portrays himself in this interview as a savior to Ukraine and Europe, rather than an aggressor. Putin said to Carlson, "We haven't fulfilled our aims yet because one of them is the denazification of Ukraine, an honorable goal." Putin was later questioned if he would be pleased with his territory if he won in Ukraine, one of the few times Carlson pressed a subject in that discussion. Instead of answering, Putin denazified Ukraine. Takeaway: Putin wouldn't stop at claiming Ukraine. He wants Russia's greatness back. Other parts of the interview reveal his ideas more directly. Putin sometimes gives long, rambling speeches about Russia and Europe's past. Though lengthy, these exchanges show that Putin still views Europe in old terms, justifying his invasion of Ukraine by saying that it was part of Russia previously, so it should be today. Anyone who followed Putin's statements before the conflict knew this. The Guardian reported on Putin's hour-long address on Ukraine's history in February 2024, the same month Russia attacked Ukraine. Putin stated in that interview that Ukraine is an integral part of our history, culture, and spiritual space, and that the Bolsheviks made a huge mistake by declaring Ukraine a republic. After discussing how losing territory to end World War I was another blunder and lamenting the loss of Russian Empire territory, the land claims continued. Putin's goals are evident now. He wants old Russia back. That may not be arrogant to some. Patriots naturally want their country to return to its former grandeur and become a global leader. Putin wants to revive Russia for retribution and power, not love. Putin's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine isn't his first time in power, just the most blatant military attempt. He has tried to impose Russian domination in Ukraine multiple times in the past 2 decades. Putin and 2004 Ukrainian presidential election. Consider Ukraine's 2004 presidential election. That election was Putin's first major attempt to establish controlled democracy, a regime the Carnegie Endowment for Peace argues he seeks. Putin wants limited democracy. He wants a shadow version with elections that favor his agenda so much that they may as well not exist. To help then-Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych become president, he worked tirelessly. The man failed. Putin failed to install Yanukovych despite spending a lot of money on his campaign and trying to hide the election result. Charles Tannock, the European Parliament's representative for Ukraine, advised outgoing President Leonid Kuchma to fire the Central Election Commission's chairman due to voter fraud allegations. Tannock said the chairman had acted unethically, citing numbers showing voting turnouts of above 100% in certain regions. He said absentee ballot abuse, ballot stuffing, and voting intimidation had occurred. Putin even campaigned for his favorite candidate, while tens of thousands of Yanukovych's opponent fans protested the official tally that put him 3 points ahead in Kyiv. In the end, most of the Ukrainian parliament supported Viktor Yushchenko. The Supreme Court annulled the election, and Yushchenko won a fairer vote weeks later. Putin shot himself in the foot. By supporting Yanukovych so much that he tried to commit election fraud, Putin ended up with a president in Ukraine he didn't want and who wouldn't negotiate with Russia. Putin turned to the KGB to overthrow Ukraine's president when his political maneuvering failed. Putin failed in his attempt to murder Yushchenko soon after taking office, just as he failed to influence the 2004 Ukrainian election. Putin was shamed. Putin's failure and Ukraine invasion. Putin's image as a skilled political leader capable of influencing other nations has suffered repeated blows, particularly in Ukraine. After his failed attempt to assassinate Yushchenko, Putin sought other ways to destabilize Ukraine. In 2006 and 2009, Russia curtailed gas supplies to Ukraine under the pretext of pricing disputes, causing widespread crises and building pipelines to bypass Ukraine entirely. In 2010, Putin installed Viktor Yanukovych as Ukraine's president, temporarily achieving his goal. However, Yanukovych's refusal to sign an EU free trade agreement in 2013 ignited massive Euromaidan protests, leading to his ousting in 2014 and Ukraine's reversion to its 2004 constitution. This marked another loss of power for Putin, who then annexed Crimea as a retaliatory move. Putin's war against Ukraine appears driven more by personal grievances than geopolitical strategy. After 20 years of failed political, economic, and military efforts to control Ukraine, Putin's ego could not tolerate further humiliation. Despite framing the war as denazification and restoring Russia's past glory, it seems rooted in revenge for Ukraine's defiance and rejection of his influence. Putin's focus on personal power is evident in his political history. After becoming president in 1999, he narrowly won the 2000 election with 53% of the vote, but subsequent victories were by increasingly large margins, culminating in 87.29% in 2024. Critics argue these results reflect a managed democracy with manipulated elections to maintain his 24-year rule, which he is likely determined to extend further. Putin's destruction and arrogance. Putin has often justified his leadership with violence. One argument, according to Open Democracy, is that the 1999 Second Chechen campaign helped Putin rise quickly. A relative stranger in Russian politics, he became president less than a year after that campaign, with a lot of popular support. Based on opinion polling at the time, the organization thinks the notion is likely incorrect. But Putin may believe that being perceived as a strong wartime commander helped him seize power. Later battles, like his 2008 Georgia campaign and 2014 Crimea annexation, may have been less about gaining territory and more about establishing Putin as a powerful leader. Sow confusion and urge people to support their leader over challengers. Whatever the situation, Putin's arrogance has made him think he's Russia's only leader. He does whatever it takes to stay in power, and his 2022 invasion of Ukraine may be his next attempt to incite national pride. If Russia's 2024 election results are valid, it worked. By this time, Putin's hubris is driven by his ambition to restore Russia to its former grandeur, his need to be seen as the guy who achieved it, his vengeance against Ukraine, and his hunger for power. Putin is unaware that arrogance may have brought Russia to its knees. Let's examine how the Ukraine war has affected Putin and Russia to explain why. Russia loses. Putin's initial invasion of Ukraine failed, with Russian forces pushed back from Kyiv in a historic defeat, as reported by AP News. Ukrainian sources claim Russia's Black Sea Fleet suffered losses of 342 planes and 325 helicopters, along with at least 85,000 troops, though Ukraine alleges the toll is higher. These losses have severely damaged Russia's reputation as a military power, revealing an over-reliance on outdated technology and manpower. Without substantial foreign aid supporting Kyiv, Russia likely would have prevailed. However, Putin's miscalculation in expecting a quick victory exposed his military's obsolescence. This has emboldened other nations to view Russia as vulnerable, particularly as it increasingly resorts to using outdated Soviet-era hardware. Regardless of the war's outcome, Russia faces significant long-term challenges. A victory would burden Moscow with the cost of rebuilding a devastated Ukraine while contending with ongoing resistance and sanctions. A defeat would weaken Russia's geopolitical standing further, and sanctions like the $60 per barrel oil cap could persist, compounding economic difficulties. While the IMF forecasts Russia's economy to grow by 3.2% in 2024, surpassing both the UK and EU, this growth is misleading. It stems from high oil and gas prices, which mask an undiversified economy reliant on energy exports. Post-war, Russia may have to lower prices to remain competitive, further straining its finances. Putin's ambitions have left Russia facing a grim economic future, regardless of the outcome, with the war exposing vulnerabilities in its military and economic strategies. After the conflict, what happens? In 2023, Russia allocated 5.9% of its GDP to military spending, with 40% directed toward war efforts, including paying soldiers, producing weapons, and compensating the families of the deceased. Post-war, this economic support will collapse, leading to mass layoffs in the defense industry and leaving Russia heavily reliant on China for financial backing. Russia's dependency on oil exports, particularly to China and India, highlights its lack of economic diversification. With Europe reducing Russian oil imports from 45% to just 4.5%, China now buys 50% of Russia's crude oil. While this provides short-term revenue, it deepens Russia's reliance on China. Potential sanctions could strain this relationship further, as seen with Chinese banks limiting Russia-related financing. Domestically, Putin's policies have weakened Russia's economy, its global standing, and even its influence over former Soviet states. Countries like Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Georgia have distanced themselves, while other nations bolster their military capabilities in response to Russian aggression. Western nations, including the US and UK, have provided billions in aid to Ukraine, strengthening resistance to Russia's ambitions. Demographically, Russia faces a crisis exacerbated by war. The conflict has caused hundreds of thousands to flee, adding to a declining birth rate and a population loss of 9.6 births per 17 deaths per year as of 2021. This demographic decline, coupled with war casualties and mass emigration, threatens Russia's long-term stability. Putin's quest to restore Soviet-era dominance has instead left Russia increasingly isolated, economically fragile, and demographically imperiled. Russia's economy and international position are in crisis due to these issues. Regardless of the outcome of the Ukraine conflict, the country is short on manpower and risks being subsumed by China rather than regaining its empire. What do you think? Will Putin's arrogance bring Russia down, or will Ukraine's victory allow him to rebuild? How long will it take Russia to recover from a losing war? Thanks for watching our video. Leave a comment.